Hello and welcome to the Fire Jumper program. My name is Eddie Mendonca. I am a Security CSE in the GSSO Channel Engineering Organization. Today we will be walking through a short demo flow of ISE visibility features. This is being done as part of the Visibility and Enforcement Competency area. So we will be using the DNA or Digital Network Architecture Always On demo for this demo. You can reach DNA Always On demos from dCloud by just going to dcloud.cisco.com and searching for DNA Always On. Okay, this is ISE 2.2, and you can confirm the version by going up to the gear on the top right here and clicking About, and you'll see the version. A few additions to the homepage dashboards and context visibility. In recent versions of ISE, you'll see, specifically 2.2, you'll see user information and context visibility. But first, let's take a look at the homepage dashboards. Homepage dashboards are intended to show the network administrator or ISE administrator a snapshot, if you will, of the health of the network as it relates to identity and network access control. So you'll see across the top some valuable metrics, including active and total endpoints that have been learned in the ISE database. You can see any alarm information. This particular dashboard with summary is populated with some system summary and endpoint capacity. This is all customizable. If, for instance, you wanted to move alarms down, or if you wanted to maybe change the dashlets, if you're not interested in location or BYOD, you can remove those. And up here in the top right, you'll see an Add Dashlet. Maybe you're interested in something else on your summary dashboard, like device type or status. And that just shows that. And this information is stored on the server. It's tied to your user identity, which you can see by clicking Account Settings up here to see what you're logged in as. In this Always On demo, we're logged in as AM Demo 1. So if we were to log out and back in on a different computer or different browser and we log in as the same user, any customizations would be retained. I also wanted to call out there's these 5 built-in dashboards: summary, endpoint, guest, vulnerability, and threat. If you have integrations with third-party vulnerable software tools like Rapid7 or Qualys, you would see information in vulnerability. Threat information could be populated from threat solutions like Cisco's Advanced Malware Protection. You can also create a custom dashboard here. Let's say we're interested in compliance information. We can create a compliance dashboard here and pick what widgets we were interested in viewing on our compliance dashboard. And there you have it. Again, this information is stored on the server, so if I log out and back in, it'd be retained. Next, let's take a look at context visibility. So context visibility is more of a tool for doing deeper network investigation and forensics. You're able to use these widgets to do filtering. And this table across the bottom here will actually update based on your filter. Much like homepage dashboards, we have different views in context visibility that are predefined. So we have authentication, BYOD compliance, compromised endpoint, endpoint classification, guest, and vulnerable endpoints. If you have, again, the integrations with our third-party ecosystem partners, then you would see information in vulnerable endpoints or compromised endpoints. You'll notice this little this little icon that's showing the lock here is appearing when I hover. That allows me to set my default view for context visibility. Right now it's on endpoint classification. If, for instance, I wanted to change that to compliance, I would just click the lock. And now if I pivot out and back into context visibility, then it'll go right to the compliance view, which is what I chose. I'm going to change that back to endpoint classification because I think that one's a little more useful. Let's take a look at that next. So let's assume that we want to do some filtering here. I'm going to clear the old filter here, mobile devices. And instead, I want to filter on maybe an endpoint profile. Let's filter on Samsung devices here. And you can see my table's refreshed now. So now I'm only seeing Samsung devices and these other widgets have been updated as well to show only Samsung devices. Now, if I'm only looking at Samsung devices, I probably just have one OUI type and one identity group. Let's take a look at device name and some of these other things. Again, these are all the same, so not much use filtering anymore once I've done Samsung devices. But in here, I can take actions. So let's say I wanted to, for one or more endpoints, change the authorization, to bounce those endpoints off the network, let them come back in, maybe falling into a different authorization profile. I could also assign policy using the adaptive network control feature. Okay, if I had MDM interactions, I could send an MDM action like a pin lock. Next, we're going to look at the ISE services or features that are the engine behind all of this visibility information being populated into ISE. For any ISE service or feature, the Work Center is the place to do the customizations or the configurations. It's worth pointing out, and we're going to pivot to the Work Center now, it's worth pointing out for all of these different Work Centers, there are defaults for pretty much every configuration. So what that means is if you want to profile your network, for instance, for getting this endpoint information, all you need to do is enable the profiling service, and the defaults typically work for most scenarios, okay? What you'll do is in certain scenarios, if you want to make use of various profiler probes, if we're talking about profiler, then you'll need to go into the Profiling Work Center and perhaps make some customizations. Profiler is the main source for the endpoint visibility, but it's worth pointing out that endpoint visibility is achieved with many different services in ISE. We're able to use the new passive identity feature in ISE to gain endpoint visibility from the providers, whether that be Active Directory or syslog or perhaps API providers. Same thing with guest access and BYOD. Those are portals that run that will help probe HTTP data coming from endpoints. So Profiler is the Work Center that you would go to configure all of your profiling configurations for visibility, but it's worth pointing out that some of these other work centers in ISE also help with endpoint visibility. So with that said, let's dig into Profiler. This is the Profiling Work Center. This is where you can customize Profiler. You would go in, for instance, in the deployment page and configure whatever network access probes that you, well, network access probably isn't the right term, networking protocol probes that are used for doing this endpoint visibility. That's done by clicking on the specific node, making sure that the profiling service is enabled, and we don't want to disable it, and going into the profiling config and enabling these probes, okay? There are a few that are enabled by default, but it's worth pointing out that HTTP is one that you want to enable if you have any portals running in ISE, like guest portals, BYOD portals, My Devices. If you're pointing endpoints to ISE for the use of a central web auth, then it's good to turn on this probe because you're getting that data anyway. Might as well make use of it to help profile the network. Radius is another very valuable probe. That's the one where the network access device, the wireless LAN controller, or the wired switch is actually doing the heavy lifting with profiling the endpoints and just relaying that back to the ISE server in Radius packets. Nmap, DNS, I'm not going to go through the details on all of these, but you'll really want to look at your customer's environment and enable the probes that make sense for you. Go back to the Work Center. And the next thing we may want to tweak our feed service. So we want to make sure that when new profiling updates get populated to the central repository at Cisco, that your ISE instance is able to pull in the latest and greatest profiling policies. That's done through this feed service. You can do an on-demand update, or you can schedule the feed service to get updated. Next thing we'll look at is if you want to use profiling to do authorization decisions, then what you would do, this would be the default setting, no COA. You'd want to go into this profiling config and change the COA type to reauth, and that will allow the profiling engine in ISE to bounce endpoints off the network so that they come back in and hit the right authorization profile. Let's take a look at the profiling policies. These are the policies built into ISE for profiling the endpoints. And by that I mean each one of these, and there's, well, looks like it keeps growing. Typically there's about 800 if you have the medical device profiles added. On a generic ISE installation, there would be around 520. But again, since we have the medical NAC device profiles added here, that's why you're seeing the number over 800 here. But what these are you know, rules, if you will, policies that dictate how we profile this type of device. We can filter through these. Let's say we're only interested in, I don't know, anything to do with iPads. Let's see what iPad policies. We have a lot of copies. That's why we have over 800. Looks like this always on demo environment. People are playing with creating policies quite a bit. So what you would do is you would clone this. This is showing how we profile an iPad. If you wanted to create a more granular profile for perhaps an iPad Air or an iPad Air 2, then you can tweak these profiling conditions and clone this policy to profile something different. Logical profiles are just what the name suggests, and that is a logical grouping of devices. So, for example, if you wanted to define that printers on your network, all types of printers, whether they be Xerox or Epson or HP, they all got put into the same authorization profile. It would be nice to have one logical profile that you could use in your rule, and that's what these are for. Okay, cameras, printers, and you could even create your own logical profiles. Last thing we want to show with profiling is the ability to run reports. In ISE 2.2, all you need to do is just click on the reports link, and it'll automatically run the default report. You remember the little lock icon that we showed in context visibility? That same lock is used for defining what your default report is. You can see it's currently profiled endpoint summary. So when we go into profiling reports, it'll automatically run the profile endpoint summary for this given time interval, which is the last 7 days, and that is the report. Well, this concludes the ISE network visibility demo. Thank you for your time.